What's up, everybody? Happy summer to you. Coast to Coast Podcast. I'm Joey Powell. This is Inside Carolina's semi-weekly during the summertime look at UNC basketball and recruiting. We're brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Glad y'all are here. If you are anywhere close to the physical location where we are recording this from, the Southeast in North Carolina specifically, you know that it is hotter than fish grease outside. And we are hoping that this episode will cool you down a little bit, give you some things to listen to distract you from the fact that outdoors is roughly the same temperature as the surface of the sun. With us, as always, the two guys that you guys are really here to hear. Sherrell McMillan, Sean Moran. Appreciate you guys making yourselves available as always for the show. Remember, if you're listening to us, make sure that you have subscribed. Make sure you rate and review us. I would appreciate that. Ben Sherman would appreciate that. Buck Sanders would appreciate that. Um, who knows? Lodrick and Roderick Stewart would probably appreciate that. But hope you guys will give us a rating review. If you're watching us on the YouTubes, um, as old folk might say, make sure you subscribe there and you get every episode that IC puts out. Tommy and Don have been on fire with some of the football recruiting content because there's been camps going on, and you know, actual fall camp for football. Those guys report in just a matter of like I think 18 days. So go ahead and get on that. We appreciate you guys being here. Appreciate you making us a part of your normal podcast listening habits. Before we get started, I would be incredibly remiss if I did not take a moment. And I hate to start the show on a sad note, but we have to say goodbye. And I'm assuming that John Siegley will probably drop some old boys to men. Hard to say goodbye to yesterday in the background here, but um, uh, a big part of the Coast to Coast podcast has left us, and I know that Sean has had his moments of grief. I think Sherrell's probably still wrestling with it, but it's all new to me. So if I break in the middle of the show, I hope you guys will bear with me. But um, Sherrell McMillan, for those of you who are watching us on YouTube, Sherrell McMillan has lost his curtains, and those curtains had been as much of a part of the fabric, pardon the pun, of this show as anything. And I just want to make sure that we take some time to acknowledge the contributions that those curtains have made, and certainly we will wish them the very best in their future endeavors. Sherelle, would you like to say anything at a tough moment? I know this has been heavily weighing on you, but I'd give you the floor if you'd like to just make a notion about them.
They will be missed.
Yeah, short, sweet, to the point. Those curtains served you well. Um, you know, they were always there to bring light into a situation. They could act shady at times, but we're really grateful at what they were able to bring. And you've always heard that love is the only thing that could drive out darkness. Well, those curtains could drive out darkness too. All right, that's enough. We're moving on now. Sherelle, Sean, it's the middle. I don't think we're dead in the middle of the evaluation period for the summer. Sherelle, I'm going to go to you first, man. What's the biggest takeaway from this past week? Because I know UNC's coaching staff were on the road, seeing different players, coaches in different spots. A lot of things going on. So I'm going to let you start off first with kind of your, I guess, succinct takeaway from this past week really, of evaluation for basketball prospects.
All right, so coaches could go on the road starting Thursday, this past Thursday, and they could be out until 6 p.m. today or Sunday, if you're listening. And there were several events that he could have went at. There was the Puma Circuit out in Phoenix. There was Under Armour. There was Adidas in Rock Hill, South Carolina. Nike started up really in essence on Saturday in North Augusta because Peach Jam is now 2 weeks. And then there was the NBA Academy, which is where Johnny Furphy kind of came to light last year and became one of the top targets before he committed to Kansas. So there were a ton of events going on, a lot of them in the Southeast region, so it was easy for coaches to get to. But also, like we said, Puma was in Phoenix, and UNC did make it out there. But I think my biggest takeaway is just there's so much influx, and I think it is a combination of obviously NIL has changed the game for good. The transfer portal has changed the game for good. But then, like we talked about in the last show, these 2025 recruits have a ton of leverage because some of them can wait, frankly, until the spring, and they can wait and see if coaches change or if player X decides to go pro or if someone leaves in the portal that could change dynamics of these guys' recruitment. So a lot of them, especially the top tier guys, are waiting. What North Carolina has done a pretty good job, I think, of is pivoting into I wouldn't say I'll say lower ranked, but that doesn't mean they're worse players, but other players than they've offered thus far. They've done a pretty good job over the last 2 months of pivoting, and that is one of the reasons they were so stretched out. Why they had folks in Rock Hill and in Phoenix and in North Augusta and in Atlanta. So just more so than normally, just feels like there's not a strong group of like 5 or 6 guys that UNC's in good with, that they're going to visit in September or October, and that they'll probably get 2 of them. They may still get 2 of them. I don't know who it would be at this point because there's a lot of competition. But that's kind of my takeaway is that it feels like you're just not really sure. It's hard to pin down lists within lists. It's hard to even understand that top 8 lists can become top 10 lists very quickly, and new schools are jumping in. So some of the old rules that I think that apply to recruiting are changing and evolving kind of in real time.
I can appreciate your perspective because you've been doing this for for literally decades now, and following prep recruiting and kind of how UNC does things. With things changing and morphing kind of on the fly as it is, do you get the sense that North Carolina's widening of their scope is driven by a desire to get some kids to pop earlier? Do you think they're trying to get guys in the boat sooner so that they can prep and know what they have, and then recruit the portal accordingly? Or do you think it's just they're just trying to get somebody regardless of any sort of time frame?
Yeah, and I think, I guess that we'd have to decide what early meant. But yeah, I think any coach would be like, I'll take these 3 guys, be done, and figure the rest out later. I think every coach would tell you that they would rather have the bird in the hand than wait for some of the top guys into March and April of next year. Yeah, I think they would love that. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen. I know last time we talked about how it seems like there's probably a group of about 7 or 8 schools who are all after the same 23 or 24 guys. And I asked around about that. And one thing that one national analyst said was that a lot of these schools are starting to just really prioritize winning. And sometimes the highest ranked guys, as we know, don't necessarily equate to winning. And so you have several schools who are going after guards like a Caden Lewis all of a sudden who 3 months ago, some of us knew who he was, but I don't think the country did as a whole. And now every blue blood program is after him. So they're targeting people who can affect the winning, who can affect, change and do it over the course of a couple of years versus coming in, kind of getting theirs for a year and moving on. So that's why I think you're seeing a shift in so many of the same schools recruiting the same player. So I think I answered your question in that yes, they would love to get some guys to commit early, and I think that's part of broadening the scope, but also it still is trying to ensure that UNC has a quality high school class.
Sean, I'm going to ask you a question, and it's not that I'm putting you on the spot just for the sake of kind of grilling you, but I'm curious to hear your insight. And I think a lot of folks that follow this show are probably the same way. I'd love to know who you think probably has the most to prove over this eval period of the guys that North Carolina has offered so far. And I recognize that's a big number. So if you want to just pick out one or two and maybe tell why they have a lot to prove rather than trying to nail down who has the most to prove, then maybe that's an easier task.
That's a tough question because I think the guys that they did offer, there's almost 2 groups. The guys from the initial offers that have been the top ten players in terms in that group. I would say Koa Pete to a certain extent, just because he has been on the U17 stage for so long, really since he was a freshman. From a physical stature, he was more imposing than most of the 17s at that at that young age, and he's continued, just won his second gold medal, so continues to get the accolades. But as people have caught up, I think just from a size perspective, wanting to see how his game continues to progress, and that was uh, didn't see all his shots over the weekend, and I know Sherrell got to see him live, but one thing that I did like, it did seem his shot was looking a little better, especially off the dribble. I think still has a ways to go from the 3-point line, even though he can hit that. But when you think about now and how defenders are going to play guys, I think for him, they're just going to stay off him and prove that he can be a shooter or that he can attack. And it looked like he was continuing to make strides to make sure that even though he has that physical superiority, he's still evolving his game. But in terms of the other group, I mean, I don't think Caden Lewis has anything to prove because he's gotten all the big offers and continues to play very well. But I would say Dixon from Gonzaga, just in terms of getting a UNC offer, he made a jump, but maybe not the as big of a jump as some of the others. And playing with team takeover, very solid guard, scored well in his first game, struggled a little bit in the second game and over the weekend. But he definitely is one guy that you would project to be a multi-year, 3-4 year player. So I wouldn't say he has a lot to prove, but those would be the two guys that come to my mind, both in the first class of the initial offers and then the group from a few weeks slash a month ago.
And you recently had a chance to pop up, and I'm going to go a little bit off of our script here, but I want to give you a chance to talk into this. You finally got around to wrapping up the project you've been doing about Cade Tyson. Is there anything about that? And I'm not asking you to regurgitate what you did there because I think most everybody's seen it. If you're listening to this or watching this and haven't seen it, go check it out. Sean did a really good in-depth piece about what Cade Tyson's going to bring to the roster. What's something Cade Tyson has to do between now and November or whenever it is that North Carolina tips off this year?
I think the one thing I would like to see him do is continue to evolve in the post. He most likely, given the roster, will be playing a lot of minutes at the four. So I think if he is matched up with a true four, that helps him playing on the perimeter, finding himself, for open looks on three, especially in transition. But when he did struggle, teams would some of the more athletic teams, they would just put a true three on him that's maybe 6'5", or just switch 1 through 4. And similar to what we saw, I think Duke do with Brady Manick, and what we saw towards the end of just, hey, let's face guard him, make it uncomfortable from three to as much extent as we can. And that's what you noticed during the season. So if he is able to develop a little bit more of a post game, and when he did post this year, some of it was like, hey, I'm going to try to back you down from the 3-point line, or make a kind of a slow turn over my left shoulder. So if there's ways for him just to duck in and utilize that size a little bit better, I think that will help. And then really from a shooting perspective, I think it's more on how is UNC going to look to manufacture shots for him when he gets it set. When he's set with a good base and has that left pivot foot set and that right pivot foot or right foot ready to jump up, like it's pretty much automatic. But when he's moving right to left, it's a little slower, where that right foot takes a little bit longer. So Belmont did a really good job using flare screens and just opening up just a few seconds for him off the ball or looking to create space, which at the same time also helped him off the dribble, because he's definitely not comfortable and built like Cormac Ryan. I mean, he's 6'7", so everything takes a little bit longer. But when he does catch it in motion and he can get into that 1-2 pull up, it's a pretty definitely will be a weapon if used correctly. So it took a lot of time going through pretty much every offensive and defensive possession, but you got to see really the ebbs and flows where, at some point, I think it was really towards late January, it looked like his legs got a little heavy at certain times. Then all of a sudden, that late February, you started to see him look almost more fluid in a lot of his movement. So, I think exciting to have him next season, and a lot of it will be how is UNC going to look to utilize him, because it won't be the Cormac style of, hey, let me start you under the basket give you 2 screens or pin down and curl up, because that's not how his body's going to function. So it's going to be a little bit quicker in movements. And then finally, defensively, each game, I think how he's going to match up on the 4, the 3, I think with the length helps him, but sometimes the agility will be that Achilles heel, and as well as the physicality in terms of what teams will look to attack when they have the right personnel.
This is not a way to, I guess, bury or deride the strength and conditioning program at Belmont. But I do think that Jonas being able to work with him for this entire summer and then helping with some of his recovery, may help prevent some of the things that you saw last year around that end of January point where he was kind of getting dead legged, and hopefully some of that some lower body strength and bring him up for some lateral quickness a little bit might get him more to being a tool similar to what Brady Manick had. Sherrell.
I was just gonna say too, to your point, Joey, he arrived in the first session,
Mhm.
summer school, which is about a month before the freshmen and some, Vinal and Lubin arrived. So I go back to Brady Manick. He got there as soon as he could that first semester of summer
Mhm.
school, and it really helped him integrate himself quicker into UNC's offense, into what they were trying to do, into the community and all that. And a part of that is the weight room. So
Mhm.
I don't know if in a game in March you can say, oh, the fact that he got there a month early is helping out now. But I do think it's a factor that he can spend more time with Jonas for that extra month.
And we can confirm that Brady Manick has been in Chapel Hill some this summer, running with the current players and some of the alumni for some of these camp games. So if you're one of the many folks who listen and watch this show that have such fond memories of what Manick was able to do in his short time at Chapel Hill, Cade Tyson's been able to see that up close. Sherrell,
Uh,
you've been.
One
Go
one
ahead, Sean.
one last thing, I think, as everybody kind of gets into the field with UNC players, you can almost tell, hey, as they shoot it, if it's off on, how it's going to look. And I think for Tyson, it was almost in my head left right, meaning once again that left foot and right and elevate. You felt it was pretty good. But some of the other, sometimes he would fade back a little bit. So when it was left right straight up, you're like, okay, that's going in. Obviously, it didn't go in all the time, but that's kind of the repetition you want to see when he's getting out on the left wing or right wing, and will be interesting to see, especially if he can get out in transition. He's not afraid to fire it up early, and I think that can make for some open opportunities, especially if Cadeau's pushing the ball and can find, and if he can run with Cadeau on in transition.
Absolutely. And for a guy like yourself that loves the analytics of points for possession and those sorts of numbers, that sort of transition three ball can really change the game for this North Carolina team, who we've established on this show is going to have to push pace. And Hubert Davis has said as much in some of his comments that he expects to push pace this coming season. One of the things I think that will really be helpful for Cade Tyson is his proximity to Johnny T-shirt. It's clear that he did not have that, though he did have access, via Johnny T-shirt's quick shipping. Um, but now he's got the ability to just roll in there on East Franklin Street and check out the stuff and literally put his hands on the goods. I think that's going to really open up some things for him as he continues to get comfortable in Chapel Hill, get comfortable as part of the UNC basketball program. Um, Johnny T-shirt, as we know, has been the haberdasher of choice for Inside Carolina subscribers for a long time, and have really been taking care of people in Chapel Hill and all around the globe for their Tar Heel needs. Sherrell, I was blessed by the Johnny T-shirt fairy this past week. If those of you who are football fans, have you seen the throwback white jerseys that the
Well,
football team has broke out?
let me ask this: why were you blessed this particular week?
I don't know, no idea. There was just some things happened, and I made some comments on the social media about how ice cold those new white throwbacks were, and then sure enough, later that evening, was in some celebratory modes with my family, and sure enough, what had been purchased and wrapped for me from Johnny T-shirt was said white throwback, and y'all, I'm telling you, it's clean. I mean, it is absolutely like, recently bleached baptismal pool clean. So I need y'all to check out Johnny T-shirt if you want to get your hands on one of those before football season starts. And again, it's white, so you can wear it to the games and in the early season and not sweat your behind off. Johnny T-shirt, premium subscribers to Inside Carolina know you get that extra 10% off the top. Make sure you use it. Use that code on the premium message board. Tell them we sent you. They'll take care of you. Johnny T-shirts is great people, and you guys are great people, great listeners, great viewers. Y'all need to hook up. Let the national guys run some ads in here real quick. We'll be right back with this edition of the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com. All right, Sherrell, Sean, thank you guys so much for joining me on this episode of the Coast to Coast. I'm Joey Powell. Appreciate everybody sticking around after the break there. Sherrell, you have been hashtag grinding like Noah the last couple of days. I know you've been out at the various tournaments that you mentioned earlier, but you've also been getting a lot of Q&As published on the site. You've spoken to Caden Lewis. You have spoken with Braylon Mullins. You have spoken with Nico Bundalo and also Jasper Johnson. I'm going to point everybody here. We're not going to turn this into a show where we just recap everything that's been on the site, but I do want to point everybody to go check those actual interviews out. You can read them on the premium message board. Sherrell, I'm going to ask you, just give me a quick, 1 or 2 word takeaway from each of those, and then how that might play for North Carolina fans in general. First, let's go to your Q&A with the Caden Lewis.
Well, first, let me give credit to Ben Sherman, one of our bosses, because he is the one who did the Q&A for Caden and for Jasper. So Joey's probably going to get a stern letter from management after this.
Yikes.
Yeah. But no, Caden, I think it really is the fact that he's gone from someone who had a regional recruitment to now a blue blood recruitment. And what's really important to him, I think, even more so than NIL, and that obviously can change, is that he wants to play. He wants to play immediately. And if you start projecting what Carolina might have or what could happen, I mean, there's going to be an opportunity, even with minimal defections, there's still going to be opportunity for playing time early at UNC. So that's big. And then, he drops a pretty big phrase that some people are afraid of when it comes to UNC and maybe being someone who grew up liking Carolina. He dropped a certain phrase that people get scared of. But I think that was the first time I had seen that on record as something we had heard in the past, that, he'd be very open to hearing from UNC. So I think those two things from Ben's interview with Caden really jumped out to me, that like playing time is going to be really, really important to him. And then he didn't have any issue saying that, North Carolina was a school he grew up liking a lot.
All right, sticking with the work that Ben Sherman did. That's Ben Sherman, General Sherman, editor of InsideCarolina.com. I don't know what y'all heard earlier, but I clearly attributed this to Ben Sherman's work. Jasper Johnson, takeaways from that. Again, similar to what you just did with the Caden Lewis.
Not really anything, honestly, because I think Jasper has.
Stop laughing, Sean.
He's another one who's been in the spotlight for a long time, and so I think maybe he tires of the interview process at times, and kind of just kind of says things. But I think we all have heard that his recruitment is winding down. He kind of said that it wasn't, so that was interesting. I don't know, again, if that's just him kind of saying something in the moment or if that's actually the case. But yeah, I think that was the biggest takeaway. The potential visits elsewhere we had heard about. We'll see if those actually happen. But I do think North Carolina is still pretty strong in this recruitment, and it's going to be in it till the end.
All right, and then the two others, Braylon Mullins and Nico Bundalo. Again, I think both of those guys have set visits. Am I correct? So, what's your takeaway from those interviews?
So Nico's working on a visit. He actually is.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah. No, all good. He's in Serbia. He was born in America, but his father is Serbian and his mother is Bosnian. So he opted to play, or had the opportunity to play, for the Serbian national team. So he's doing that in the Eurobasket 2024 under-18 tournament in Finland. But I think he's another one who said those famous words about North Carolina growing up, that he was very fond of it. So we'll see how that impacts his recruitment. He also is a player who wants a path to playing time. Nobody wants to be given it, but they want to make sure that there's a chance that they can play when they're freshmen because that's really important to a lot of people. And then just the relationship with the head coach, I think, is important. Lewis mentioned that before. I think Johnson has mentioned it before. Bundalo has mentioned it. Just that, um, being around a positive head coach, being around a head coach that you have a good relationship with, is going to be important in their recruitments.
And Braylon Mullins, the last one.
Yeah, it was the first time I actually got to talk to him. He seems like a cool dude, like just a cool kid. Like if I was 17, I probably would want to hang out with him. He just seems nice and well adjusted. But his head coach, and you'll love this, Joey, his AAU coach, the first thing he said about him, I said, just tell me about Braylon Mullins in general. He said he's a dog. I said, okay. And he was just like, do you
Arf,
need anything else?
arf.
He was like, do you need anything else? I was like, I mean, yeah, let's continue the interview, but I get it. He barks. He's a dog. He's got it in him. But just the fact that with Mullins, right now he says he plans on taking like 7 or 8 official visits, and I admire that. He says he wants to. He said several times he wanted to put his own eyes on canvases, but that is a lot of visits back to back to back over the course of about 8 weeks. So I think that's one to watch and to see which visits he actually takes, because 8 visits in about 9 weeks is tough.
Yeah, I could see where that would, he gets halfway through and it wears on him. Sean, what you got?
I was gonna say real quick for him, Sherrell. I know you watched him go cold for a while and then heat up. What was the in person viewing experience like for that one?
It was interesting because he was a lot taller. This is the first time I've seen him in person because we hadn't been to an Adidas event this year, and he was taller than I expected in person for someone who's kind of labeled as a combo guard. Like I think in some offenses he can probably play the wing. Like seems to be legit like 6'5". But I texted Sean and Ben, and I was just like, man, just one of those weeks where we watched. I think it was 2.5 games of Mullins, and he hasn't shot the ball well. And then I didn't have a chance to respond to them over the next 45 minutes. And I said, "Oh, he's hit 5 of 8 threes since I said that." So it just went from, it's like something snapped. It went from he wasn't able to really get anything going, and he got really hot really quickly. I think he ended up with 23 points in that game. But I like his all around game. He's obviously a shooter, but he really does more than that. I know that's become a cliche for people who are labeled as shooters to say, "Well, I'm more than a shooter." But like he actually is. He has a really strong, I feel, all around game. I don't think he'll ever be a primary initiator in an offense, but he can do a lot of secondary creation. And then he moves the ball really well too. We for years have talked about how much better Carolina is when the ball doesn't stick. And Mullins is the type of player where the ball won't stick, and that's why he's on such a good team.
Man, it sounded like you had given him the Cormac Ryan jinx that we saw from you this past season, and I guess it was like late January. And it seems like he just did that over the span of one afternoon. But love to see that, Sean. I'm glad you asked that question. I want to come to you with one here now. Of those 4 guys, and they're all 24, all 25 offers from Hubert Davis and his staff. Of those 4 players, Caden Lewis, Jasper Johnson, Nico Bundalo, and Braylon Mullins, which one do you think is ready to play college ball right now?
Great. I mean, I think I would go with really the 3 guards being ready to play. I think Lewis, just from his ability to control the pace, I think you could put him in at at a point guard position right now. I think definitely some areas to improve, but just the way he plays and the ability to handle the ball. Obviously, very strong left-handed is natural, but can finish well from with his right hand. But I just think the pace he plays at. Mullins, I think will get there, but I think if you wait another year when he's ready to come in, that'll be the appropriate time versus if he were to come in right now. And Jasper, I think he could light it up like a microwave if he came in right now or if he comes in next year. I think the thing with him is the consistency, which hopefully this summer and next year can work on that a little bit because he can come in and probably get you nine quick points, with 3 threes right off the bat. But as as we saw with one of the games today, he can fire up a lot and sometimes go cold. So the consistency for him. So probably go Lewis if I had to pick one of those four.
All right, I can appreciate that, and I can see your logic path there
I
too.
mean,
Uh,
I do. I said I do enjoy watching Mullins. I think it was the first day they were down a lot, so it wasn't the normal shot you'd have in a game situation. But he just brings the ball up the court and just fires it from the volleyball line. And I think when his first offer mentioned white chocolate, not in terms of the ball handling or the creativity passing, but when he shoots it, it looks like he's hit 5 in a row and his feet are kicking up and he's got that kind of confidence on each of his shots. So it is fun to watch, especially when he does get going with that quick release.
Sherrell, I'm going to come to you before we kind of put a bow on this here show. Um, Travis Branham, who we love, been on the show before, national recruiting analyst for 24/7 Sports, put out kind of a really good synopsis of where most of the top 20 players in the 25 class are leaning, and he kind of had some really good nuggets that he shared about each player's recruitment and also kind of where they are in their process. And just reading some of the responses from Inside Carolina subscribers, you would think that he had like collectively pooped in all of their mom's best frying pans, right? Like it was just he really really didn't paint things in a positive light, at least from what I see subscribers feel. Not judging them, just saying that's kind of what the interaction looked like to me. What would you say to folks about kind of if they're maybe having feelings one way or another about what this 25 class is going to look like? Should folks just kind of try to exercise some more patience and recognize it's going to take a while for this to develop? Is it time to start worrying about things, or do you think it's just there's too many new ingredients here for to really elicit a strong, solid reaction one way or another?
I think the biggest thing is that with the way the 2024 class kind of happened, obviously Elliot Cadeau was part of it for a long time. So you have three essentially top 10 guys in that class. And the thought was, okay, this was the moment UNC needed to move forward and to start closing on some of these top 5, top 10 guys. Now, I don't think there's been enough time since that happened because they committed so early for the results to show on the court, which will help in recruiting. So, like, the backflow from those wins hasn't really happened yet, and I think because of that, North Carolina, doesn't seem to be in prime position with most of the top 10 guys that they've offered. I think that's a fair assessment of where things stand, today, July 14th, or whatever day it is.
I would agree.
And so I think that is causing some consternation when you add it to the portal situation not going exactly the way that UNC wanted. Then it's kind of like, well, is there an issue? Is this, carrying over from the portal? Why does the negativity from the portal carry over into 2025, but the positivity from the 2024 class doesn't carry over into 2025? So I think it's a natural thing to think. I would say that um, it's more so just it's tough to land top 10 kids, whether you're Carolina. Yeah, there are other programs that have, I would say, recruited better than UNC over the last few years, and they are struggling with some of the top 10 guys as well. Whether it's because of regime changes, whether it's because of NIL, whether it's because of guys who have entered the portal, whatever the reason, a lot of schools are adjusting to this new world, and I think Carolina is no different in that they're not, they have to deal with it as well. So I would say one, I understand it completely. It makes sense, and you're like, why are they struggling? But two, really nobody in 2025 has committed anywhere. I think there's maybe two in the top 30 or 35 that have committed anywhere. And despite NIL and despite agents and money and all that stuff, kids will still visit places and fall in love, whether it's Carolina or Bloomington or Corvallis or wherever it might be. Like, guys can go to campus, fall in love, and figure everything out later. So I think visits are still a huge deal. Obviously, there are other factors at play, but we'll see once the fall starts, where UNC lands. Because if they end up with, a class of 3 top 30 guys in this day and age, you'll take that and keep moving.
Absolutely.
add to the portal and go forward. I think it's just that for so long, the other blue bloods, Duke and Kentucky in particular, and now the Calipari's at Arkansas, they've gotten so many of those top 10 guys. The Carolina fans are just frustrated because in the past, in the 90s and into Roy Williams' term, UNC got those guys and they haven't gotten them recently. So I think it's just frustration from that. And I understand it, but I also think the world is different. And frankly, you don't need those guys as much in 2024 as you did in 1994.
I think that's a fair rundown. And again, I don't begrudge anybody now who's asking questions. Because again, you look at the guys that Travis listed out in his write up, and it was very thorough. And North Carolina really didn't seem to be mentioned for a lot of those guys, at least from his perspective. So that leaves us with about 2 weeks remaining in the eval period. Sherrell, what are you thinking the staff's going to do? And then Sean, I'm going to pop over to you and say, what are you going to be watching for over the next 2 weeks? Sherrell, go first.
I'm gonna wag my finger at the NCAA. Just I'm gonna wag my finger because they changed things so where there were only 2 eval periods in July, and then I think Nike maybe exerted some influence because Peach Jam is now a 2 weekend event, and so they wanted to make sure that coaches were going to be able to be on the road for the second weekend. So they added this eval period after the last one, after the schedule had already come out. However, coaches can't be on the road until Friday at 6. And if you're familiar with the way Peach Jam works, pretty much everybody outside of about 7 or 8 teams are done by Friday at 6 p.m. So it's almost like not quite a waste of coaches' time because they still get a chance to evaluate, but there's not going to be a ton to do. Adidas has an All-American event in Atlanta, so that'll be nearby again in that Georgia corridor, and then Pro 16, which is Puma, is in Indianapolis, and then UAA I think has another session. So there'll be places to go. They just only have about 24, or I guess about 36 to 40 real hours of potential evaluation, and during that there's not as many games being played. So wag my finger to the NCAA, and then the NCAA Basketball Academy, which I still don't understand or get, is in Rock Hill, South Carolina, the final weekend in July. So there's an opportunity, but I just don't know how much coaches really get from that.
And Sean, I'm going to ask you, what do you feel like you're going to be watching for over the next couple of weeks? Who do you? I mentioned earlier asking you who you felt like had the most to prove, but I'm going to ask you, what are you looking for from maybe a player development standpoint, or who do you think that's on UNC's radar that you're going to be paying attention to?
Well, I think just going off what Sherrell said, I mean, I was going to ask him about usually when you go to one of the first few days of that first live period, I mean, the energy and excitement and everything is packed. But especially when you had the 3 live periods like you did previously towards that third one, especially out that Friday, Saturday. I mean, those gyms would be pretty pretty dead, minus a few assistant coaches that are still hanging around. So that sounds similar to maybe what will be coming up. But I think for this one, with how Adidas started first and then it transferred to Nike, you didn't have to have the coaching staff. Like you could kind of see where the coaches were, and it made a nice, easy transition from the bigger, from Adidas to Nike almost. Well, they were able to mix in some of the other ones. So I think once again, watching, who are they out of those the 2025 offers? Who are they focused on? Do some guys start to fall off that are either that initial set of offers or the current ones, or are there ones that have more focus? And then I also think from the 26th, they were probably able to, outside of the offers that they have already, probably start to see a little bit more. So one, will there be any offer? What offers, if any, will be coming out of this weekend? And then two, next week with, as Sherrell said, more of a limited or select set of games. Where are they, and who are they focused on? Because I think that'll determine the July or post July offers in both those classes.
That'll be interesting to watch as we see the eval period start to wind down. All right, guys, this is the point in the show where we like to show some love to our friends at Congruity. Congruity HR can help you get your small or medium-sized business up to where you want it to be. They're going to take care of a lot of the I guess PEO type stuff, the benefits, the human resources, just the stuff that's such a huge time suck for small and medium sized business owners and managers, so that you can get back to focusing on growing the business, finding more revenue, finding more sales, just business development, and get yourself away from the other things that can really kind of bury you if you let it. We love those guys. Congruity are just, great human beings. They have really, really become emotionally invested in success of North Carolina businesses, and that's why they're sponsoring Inside Carolina. So make sure you guys go to congruityhr/Tar Heels. They will give you that free business assessment. They'll be able to tell you, hey, can we help you or can we not? And it doesn't cost you anything. Which last I checked, free 99 is the good price. So we love Congruity. Want you guys to love them as well. And this is our 2 cents presented by Congruity. Sean, give me 1 penny, and Sherrell's going to give me 1 penny, and we're going to put a bow on tonight.
I think really for me, focusing on Caden Lewis, he has 8 schools remaining. But being a DC guy, I think right now you have the best of the best that are recruiting him. So how can UNC stand out? Obviously, they've had him on campus and expect to have him down the road. And as Sherrell noted, probably not a commitment that's going to happen anytime soon. But can they hold really it down on the East Coast? They're going to be going head to head, Duke, UConn, Kentucky, etc. I think some of those schools, Michigan's probably not as realistic, but can they win a recruitment like that? We have seen them do it with Ian Jackson and Cadeau and others, but I feel right now they're in the mix for a lot of the same guys with these other schools, and these guys have interest in them, but it's not, UNC isn't head and shoulders above for anybody. So really, for Caden Lewis, they prioritized him. A lot of other schools have. Can that be a can that be a recruitment that they win, given the local nature of it being from DC, as well as him already getting on campus? So that's just, I wouldn't really call it a penny, but really in terms of all the different recruitments going on, with his rise as well as where he sits and who's looking at him. Just one of the things that I'll be monitoring over the next weeks and months.
And you and Sherrell have both mentioned that multiple times in the show about how similar, basically like the top 20 or almost even top 30 now, how similar those kids' offer sheets look, or offer sheets, offer lists look. And I would actually just, suggest to everybody that listens to the show, go look at their offer lists and recognize just how correct you guys are. Like there is a whole lot of overlap going on, and that does create a little bit of the log jam, I think, and why things are taking so long for some of these guys to pop, amongst other things. Sherrell, give me your 1 penny.
I'll go. Sean was talking about local. I'll stay local. And I'm very anxious, curious, ready to watch Mikey Wilkins. He's from Rutherfordton, North Carolina. That is one word, Rutherfordton. And he goes to school at Christ School in Nashville. He's someone who I don't know, he just has a feel for him that you feel like he's going to be really good in college over the course of a couple of years, but it's going to take him having more solid performances for kind of the blue blood schools to really take notice. And I think UNC has. They've talked to him. They've talked to his high school coach. They've seen him play some. I think the next step would be Hubert Davis watching and potentially offering. So when I get to Augusta, shouts to Ben for being there this weekend. When I get there later this week, I'm really going to watch him closely because I think there's a lot there to like, and it's just he has to continue doing it and continue building. So anxious to watch him over the next couple weeks.
Well, you guys heard it here. That's who Sherrell's watching, and Sean mentioned a couple too that he's going to be paying attention to. But as always, if there are things that you have heard about on this show, chances are there's going to be a lot more information on the Inside Carolina site or on the premium message board. That's where a lot of the really top-notch content goes. Yes, there are aggregators out there that kind of pull headlines or whatever, but you're not going to find the sort of intel that you get from this show and from Inside Carolina as a whole. So strongly encourage those of you within the sound of my voice to make that happen. Go ahead and subscribe now. There's all kinds of specials going on where you can get a subscription for pennies on the dollar. And if you save money a Johnny T-shirt and then Congruity helps save your business some money, just go ahead and turn that back around to a premium by C subscription, and you'll be living the good life. Appreciate you guys being a part of the show tonight, Sherrell and Sean. You guys always bring the heat, which is in abundance in the southeastern part of the United States. And now we've put a full circle on the show. So I appreciate you guys. Thanks to everybody for listening. Thanks to John Siegley for producing. We appreciate Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity for sponsoring us. And we will catch you all next time on the next edition of the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com. I'm Joey Powell. We will talk to you very, very soon.